Hello, I'm Andrew Shtulman from Occidental College, and I will be talking to you today about how parents talk with their children about negative aspects of the biological world. So one motivation for this research is the fact that nature is frequently portrayed as a cooperative, peaceful place, as is shown here in William Hick's painting, The Peaceful Kingdom. But it's also true of more modern media, like the Unlikely Friendships books, or children's programming that include predators and prey interacting and cooperating with each other and learning from each other. Cooperation, of course, happens in the natural world, but competition is equally important. The animal kingdom is filled with competitive behaviors, including predation, parasitism, cannibalism, as depicted here, infanticide, siblicide, cuckolding, forced copulation, and coalitional violence. Even though competition is an integral part of biology, competition seems to play a minimal role in how adults understand ecology. In one study, it was found that many adults believe that stable ecosystems have ample food, water, and shelter, a harmonious balance between overpopulation and extinction, and the capacity for all species to survive and reproduce. Evolution is also misconstrued as a non-competitive process. Many people think that organisms will inherit the traits they need to inherit in order to survive, which yields a uniform transformation of the population without any role for selection. So people think that evolution works something like this, with every generation being more adapted to the environment than the previous generation, as opposed to how evolution actually works, where adaptive traits spread through a population through the process of differential survival and differential reproduction. So here we focus on how nature is portrayed to children, as children are still learning how biological systems work. And input that suggests that competition is absent from nature might influence their developing conceptions of ecology and evolution. Specifically, we looked at how parents broach emotionally charged topics like predation and parasitism when discussing nature with their children. We know that Western adults tend to avoid talking about death with their children, and here we broaden the scope of inquiry to other negative biological topics in contexts that are specifically biological in nature. It's important to study parental input because this input is central to children's developing scientific knowledge. But most parents are not scientists, which means that their input is going to be tainted by the same biases that pervade their own folk reasoning. And research has shown that parents model such biases as animism, anthropomorphism, and essentialism. So is the same true for overly benevolent views of nature. So in study 1, we explored how parents treat negatively valenced information when they encounter that information in a children's nature book. Do they omit the information or do they elaborate on it? If they elaborate on it, what kind of language do they use? And do these patterns vary with the child's age? So we recruited 75 parent-child groups from public parks with children ranging in age from 3 to 12. Almost all of the groups consisted of one parent and one child, but a few were consisted of multiple children, and for those groups we classify them by the age of the youngest children when doing analyses for age effects. Participants were asked to discuss a book that contained 4 facts for each of 8 animals. 3 facts were neutral and 1 was negative, pertaining either to predation or aggression. So here's an example: horned frogs. On one page of the book, participants saw a picture of a horned frog accompanied by 4 facts. That horned frogs occupy the wetlands of South America. They live by themselves. They eat lizards, mice, and other horned frogs. And they make a croak that sounds like the bellow of a cow. So the negative fact here is that they're cannibals, that they eat other horned frogs. These are our negative facts for the full collection of animals. Half the negative facts pertain to predation or things that these animals eat, and the other half pertain to other kinds of negative behaviors like coalitional violence and siblicide. We coded the conversations fact by fact. So for each fact, we coded whether parents repeated it or omitted it. And then for the repeated facts, we coded whether parents commented on it, asked a question about it, or used explicitly valenced language when talking about it. We also coded for children's comments. Children rarely ask questions, so if they did happen to ask a question, it got coded as a comment. So here's some sample comments from the parents. Hippos kill more people each year in Africa than any other wild animal. Oh my gosh, geez, that's not nice. Chimpanzees eat fruits, leaves, termites, and red colobus monkeys. Oh, they eat monkeys? I didn't know that. Don't think about that. When cuckoos hatch, they break all other eggs in the nest so they don't have to compete for food. Oh my goodness, I'm not sure we like them. Here are sample questions for the same set of facts. Hippos kill more people each year in Africa than any other wild animal. So do you think they are friendly, or do you think they are very rude? Chimpanzees eat leaves, termites, and red colobus monkeys. That doesn't make any sense, does it? That they will eat other monkeys. When a baby cuckoo hatches, it breaks all other eggs in the nest so they don't have to compete for food. Can you say survival of the fittest? Some of those comments and questions included valenced language. And so in that collection, these are the ones that would have been marked as such. Oh my gosh, geez, that's not nice. Oh my goodness, I'm not sure we like them. And so do you think they are friendly, or do you think they are very rude? Here are the data. If we focus first on the repetitions, we'll see that parents tended to repeat more facts for older children than younger children, but they repeated the negative facts as often as the neutral facts. When they repeated these facts, they tended to make more comments for the negative facts than the neutral ones, and they also asked more questions for the negative facts than the neutral ones. They tended to make both types of responses more often for younger children than older children, but there was no interaction between the child's age and the type of fact. And finally, children made more comments about negative facts than neutral ones. In terms of valenced language, parents use more of this language for negative facts than neutral facts, and most parents use valenced language for at least one negative fact, and few did so for any of the neutral facts. So to summarize, parents did not omit negative facts when covering these books with their children. They elaborated on them with additional questions and comments, regardless of how old their child was. And they consistently use language that implies that these behaviors are bad, mean, or wrong. We found that children selectively commented on negative facts, but we didn't assess what they learned about those facts. So in a follow-up study, we interviewed children separate from their parents after they finished their conversations to determine whether children were more likely to recall negative facts, which we expected they would, given that these facts are salient, but possibly they were less likely to generalize negative facts. If parents selectively comment on and ask questions about negative facts, that might imply that these are unique, special, and wouldn't generalize to other animals beyond the book. So our participants in this study were 72 parent-child groups with the children ranging in age from 4 to 11. They discussed the same book of animal facts. And then children were interviewed on what they learned about 3 animals: horned frogs, meerkats, and cuckoos. So the interview about horned frogs looked something like this. They were asked some recall questions. What do you remember about horned frogs? Followed with the generic prompt, anything else? And then they were asked some generalization questions. They were asked, do you think horned frogs are the only frogs that eat each other, or might there be other frogs who do that? A question about a negative fact. And that was accompanied by a question about a neutral fact. Do you think horned frogs are the only frogs that sound like cows, or might there be other frogs who sound like that? And the particular negative fact and neutral fact that we asked about was the same for all children, regardless of whether they recalled that fact on their own. So here are the data from the conversations. We found no effects of age on any of our measures. So parents were as likely to repeat negative facts as neutral facts. They didn't omit them. And when they repeated them, they were more likely to comment on the negative facts and more likely to ask questions about the negative facts. And children were also more likely to comment on the negative facts. Parents again used valenced language when talking about negative facts, but rarely did so when talking about neutral facts. And most parents use valenced language for negative facts. Far fewer did so for neutral facts. Across these 2 studies, we had collected many responses as to how parents treat negative and neutral facts. And we ran an analysis looking at item effects. In particular, we were interested whether it was the emotional valence that was driving the difference in conversational patterns for negative and neutral facts, Or perhaps it was just that the negative facts are distinctive and hence surprising. So we recruited an independent group of raters, and asked them to assess how surprising they found each of our 32 facts and how disturbing. And then we compared those ratings to the conversational patterns. We found with regression analyses that the fact surprisingness did predict some of the conversational patterns, but when we controlled for surprisingness, we found that the fact's disturbingness continued to explain a significant amount of variance in how many questions parents asked about the facts, how many comments they made, how many valenced responses they made, and how often children comment on the facts. In terms of the interview with children following the conversations, we found that older children were more likely to recall facts than younger children and more likely to generalize facts than younger children. But we also found significant effects of fact type. So children of all ages were more likely to recall negative facts than neutral facts. And children of all ages were more likely to generalize neutral facts than negative facts. So they were treating the negative facts as more particular, more specialized to that animal and not all animals of its type. So to summarize, Study 2 replicated the main findings of Study 1. We found that parents asked more questions about negative facts, made more comments about negative facts. Children also made more comments about negative facts. Parents used Valenced language when discussing negative facts, and their responses were not qualified by their child's age. Study 2 extended those findings by showing that children are more likely to recall negative facts, but less likely to generalize them to other animals outside the book. We also found that children's recall rates were predicted by parents' conversational styles. So parents who asked more questions and made more comments had children who were more likely to remember the negative facts, but children's generalization judgments were not influenced by parents, were not predicted by parents' responses, suggesting that those were possibly made on their own. And we also found that the focus on negative facts, both the parents' focus and the children's focus, appears to be driven by the fact's valence and not just their distinctiveness. So to conclude, parents mark negatively valenced information as atypical. They do so either directly with comments or indirectly with questions. And in response to this input, children may develop overly benevolent views of nature, where they think organisms are more likely to cooperate than compete. And when they do learn about a competitive behavior, they think that behavior is specific to the target animal and not necessarily a biological regularity. The kinds of parental input that we documented here is consistent with ecological misconceptions documented in the science education literature with adults, and this input may also contribute to these misconceptions. From a developmental point of view, research on conceptual change suggests that the earlier children can be taught accurate information, the better. But some types of information might be too aversive to share without proper scaffolding or contextualization, like the information included in these books, which makes the question of how children should be exposed to negative biological information an ethical question as well as an educational one. Okay, so I'd like to acknowledge my funders, the National Science Foundation and the James S. McDonald Foundation, and also my undergraduate research assistants, Katie Abelson, Isabel Checa, Tori Leon, Caitlin Morgan, Madeline Rash, and Amanda Schlitt, and of course my co-authors, Andrea Villalobos and Devin Zeal. And I look forward to your questions in the Q&A period.